Hey guys, it's March, and you're listening to Hola Bichola, Queen of the Rings. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. So, surprise, I'm recapping The Rings of Power on Amazon Prime. And one of the reasons why I wanted to get into this show is because it's a first season. And, I've just recently watched all of The Lord of the Rings, and The Hobbits are one of my favorite, type of movies that are like this kind of fantasy, fantastical. They're all just so cute and they're fighting for a ring and power and all that stuff. So I thought, what a better way to get into this show. What a better way to fortify my relationships with The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings than to enter the Rings of Power. So yeah, here we are. I just finished watching the show, and a lot happened. So much so that I don't know what's going on. I wonder if any of you have that same feeling. I have an idea of what's going on, but I don't know why any of this is happening. So it's going to be really interesting, this new season that we're going to experience. So yeah, let's just get right into it. So we open up with a cold open, essentially. And, it's the typical storytelling. And the name of the episode is called A Shadow of the Past. And so one of the things about this show that I thought was really compelling was that it's 1,000 years, 3,000 years in the past. So the fact that this episode is the shadow of the past, I didn't realize we could get further beyond the time period we're already in. But nonetheless, I learned a lot, and I hope you learned a lot too. So the kind of the cold opening scene, we're in a field, in a meadow with a bunch of children in white, and they're all just laughing and giggling and twirling in the meadows. And it kind of goes over to a little girl, and she seems to be creating something or playing with something. And so we already know that she's othered, since she's not playing with the kids. All the kids are twirling, and she's by the river on a stone. So she's going to be quite an interesting character already. And she proves us right when we see her playing with a sort of paper mache boat. Mind you, they're all elves, so they're magical in nature. So whatever boat she creates is probably going to come to life and fly away or something. But they're by a creek, and she puts the boat on the creek, and all the kids are kind of like, hey, is your boat going to work? And she's like, duh. Do you know who I am? My boat is going to work. And her boat works, and it's beautiful, and it's down the river or down the little creek, and everyone is all the little kids are cheering for her. But then soon enough, it gets really dark, and they start trying to destroy the boat that she's created because they're jealous, obviously. I mean, I wouldn't assume anything else. So we see her pretty upset, and then these lame kids come, and one of them throws a big rock at her boat, and the boat sinks. The stone sinks the light, airy boat. And now this is important, because this is basically what this episode is about. So once he throws a stone, she immediately goes to kick his ass. And I'm so thankful for her energy and her urge to, she really should have just ended his life right then and there. But, because they're elves and they're graceful, she was interrupted by her sibling. And her sibling's name is Finrod. And so Finrod is talking to the character, her name is Galadriel. let me tell you something. This Galadriel name is going to be a very common Dominican name because one thing we sure love is to mix up names. And this one, I can already see it being a big favorite. So we have Finrod talking to Galadriel, and they're by a tree, which is also very significant in this episode, or in this season, or in all of the thrones, all of the Lord of the Rings. And they're having a sweet conversations about nothing, honestly. And he's basically, just kind of like putting some game on her, giving her some truths, some things to think about. And he foreshadows his own death by saying that he's not going to be around to be able to help her with things that she will need, which we all know it's like first 15 minutes in, and he's already talking about how he's not going to be around much for very long, or won't be around forever. So immediately I knew, well, Finrod finna die. And so I guess it's dinner time, and they're being called to go eat food or go home. And as they're walking up the hill, there's like this beautiful scene of like these trees, and there's like a golden tree that kind of has like the sun behind it, but then right beside it, it's like a cool and cold tree. You have like hot and cold in the same space. So again, I think we're being told that we're going to be dealing with fire and ice. And so that was that. Then we learn about this upcoming war, and the elves have to leave their motherland called Valinor, which is the old home, and they end up migrating over to Middle Earth. And on their way over there, the elves are now at war with the orcs. And again, it's like a fight between, I don't want to say good and evil. Feels more like light and dark for me. I'm going to go with it's a war against the lightness and the darkness. And I wasn't sure if they were actually orcs. I didn't know if they could call them orcs, or if they could use the same, characteristics. But man, those orcs are so ugly. They're just like roaches. They just look so vile. I don't understand, why are they so ugly? I was very distracted by how ugly they were. And they get into it with Finrod, and Finrod dies. And his sister Galadriel is basically, they're all cleaning up the mess from the war that lasted thousands of years, I think. I don't know if I got that right. Thousands of years, if not days, but days could be years for them. Who knows how time moves in this space. So while she's kind of cleaning up, she finds what I think is Finrod's helmet. And they're putting all of the helmets on a mound. And I guess out of all the helmets, she found his, which, okay. It was bittersweet, but how did she find his helmet out of all those helmets? She found the last one, and it happened to be his. I find that quite sus, if you ask me. So now we're starting to realize that darkness is winning, and we get a glimpse of Sauron, which he is, they are a part of the original The Lord of the Rings. So I guess he's still around. He's been around. He just doesn't die, right? Because he like bounces from like, he's like a soul. So he bounces from being to being. So you can't really kill it. Interesting. Okay, so one of the things I found really interesting in the scene, in particular in this like sequence, was we see Sauron, and he's like gathering all the orcs, and they all multiply and duplicate like roaches. Ugh. Um, which, okay, whatever. But we see Sauron up at this mound, and it's super cold and dark, and he's clearly starting. He is clearly starting in this moment. He's not going to let up. But then we move back to Galadriel with her brother, and he's laying on like, a mortician like bed, but not like traditional like modern, but like, elven times. Elvian, is that how you say Elvian? Forgive me, I don't know these terms, but I'm just gonna say Elvian until I get it right. She's talking to him, and she's sad that he's gone, and she sees that he's been what is that term again? Oh my goodness, it's like leaving my brain. When you get like burned on, what they do to cattle when they like they get branded. Thank you, branded. They get branded. So he was branded with Sauron's sigil sign, and I guess that has powers. But the question I have is, how did they get his body? Wasn't he at a war? Didn't the orcs take over his body? I would think that they would chop him up or eat him or dispose of him. So how did she have access to his body? Do people in this time period, beings in this time period, do they all fight and then everybody just like sends their loved ones back to where they're supposed to go? I thought we'd never see him again, but yet here he is, just like with a few scratches, dead and branded. I have questions. I have questions. This is where Galadriel's vengeance begins. You can see the darkness filling her up with rage. And she's kind of doing a voiceover, and she's talking about how she's going to find Sauron and kill him, or kill it. And she's kind of losing sight because that's her only mission. And so in this mini montage, we're seeing her and her crew go over all of these mountains and all of these valleys and all of these roads. And they get to this place called Forderwaith, which is the northernmost waste of wherever they are. I don't think it's Middle Earth. Middle Earth is where they live, so it can't be there. But they're in a place called Forderwaith. And it's cold. It basically looks like a big ice sheet. And she's free soloing with all of her mates. And it's windy and it's cold, and she feels none of it. She is so enraged that she says, I don't care if any of you behind me fall. I'm going to kill Sauron. I'm going to find him. And when I find him, I'm going to kill him. And so once they get up to the top, they're all kind of having a conversation saying, we can't do this anymore. We've been with you. It's been so long. And we haven't found any orcs. We haven't found any danger. We haven't found Sauron. I don't think we're going to find it anymore. And sure enough, the clouds open up, and there is the castle of Sauron, the one where we first saw him. So they all walk in, and now we're like in, Sauron's castle. And Galadriel walks upon like a table, and because it's Sauron, he has to like leave a mark wherever he goes, and he basically left his little sigil that says Sauron was here, just in case anyone had any questions or wondered. If anyone was confused about where they were, he wanted to make sure that they knew that this is where he was. So, that's pretty tight. I mean, I think he could be a really good graffiti artist if he really like gave it a shot. And they're kind of in this castle, right? And they're all talking, being distracted. They don't want to be there anymore. And then we see a hand, a gnarly hand. This is a huge hand. And I thought at first, like, oh, maybe this is the hand of like a Smeagol of some kind, that he's gonna look like we're supposed to be afraid of him, but he's actually gonna be like chill and like interested in also helping you find Sauron. Turns out, no, I was wrong. It was a beast, a really gnarly one. And of course, G splats him and, cuts out his guts and chops and like spears his head and then he's dead. But I think all of the other elves that she was with were pretty startled. They were pretty shocked. They just were just kind of like, I didn't sign up for this. Could we like maybe go back home? And she was like, yeah, no, we're just going to stay here for the night and then we'll get back home. And they all rose up and then put their swords down, which I didn't know what that meant. Maybe they meant like, we're done fighting for you, so our swords are on the ground. But they all left her. And yeah, she kind of lost the plot and had no one backing her up at this point. They've seen enough. I think big gnarly orc / dog beast was kind of their like limit. So finally we get to the opening credits. And so it just opens up and it just says The Lord of the Rings, the Ring of Power. And that was it. And that's all we got. And so now we're taken back to a different time or like a different location. And we're looking at these moose men. Yes, I said moose men, not like men with like hooves on their like ears. They're like these, kind of older men, I think. And they have these huge like hooves, I think, but they look like wings behind their back. And they're ginormous. And I'm not kidding. I don't know how they were walking with this on. Where does it grow out of their bodies? What is the proportion for them to be able to carry such weight and walk at the same time? Because their tiny bodies didn't match the weight that these huge bone-like, trunks, butterfly wings / moose wings. Yeah, you'll see it. They were huge, and they're there's like something that runs behind them, and they're just kind of like, what was that? Because they look like they're hunting. And the other guy's kind of like, don't worry about it. This is just kind of like where we're at. Let's just like keep moving. Let's keep hunting. So they move on. And as soon as they're out of sight, we see some hay kind of like stand up. And to my surprise, I thought it was a hobbit. And I'm thinking, oh, we get the hobbits too. How cute. And it's not just one. They all pop up like little trolls. And they're everywhere. And they're hiding in plain sight. And so we're now in a place of, trolls. And they're all kind of talking to one another, saying the coast is clear, until we see the main elder hobbit. And he basically is reading this book and sees what does he see? He's looking at a sequence of events, and it's like a bunch of little creatures, a bunch of things, and then he sees the moose men. And then he sees darkness, images of darkness soon after. So now he's looking at this as if it was an omen or, a sign of bad things to come. And also one of the things that they noted was that they were there at the wrong time period. They're supposed to be there closer to winter. And it was clearly summer or spring. They just weren't there when they were supposed to be there. So, dun dun dun. All right. I mean, I would, if the hobbits tell me that this is a problem, I'm going to believe that this is a problem. So now we're all kind of watching them, these hobbits, kind of live in this space with each other in their little community and how they relate to one another. And one of the things I noticed also about these hobbits is that they were doing a lot of accent work. I felt like their accents didn't match up to like their neighbor's accent or their friend's accent. So if any of you know where these hobbits are supposed to be from and what accent they're supposed to be using, because I actually found it a little like surprising that they didn't all share the same accent. But you know, what do I know? So then we move on to discover the Hobbit babies. The Hobbit kids are like playing in these fruit lands, and they're like eating a bunch of blackberries, which honestly, those blackberries looked so good. They were huge and they looked juicy and huge, and I wanted some. And yeah, they were all kind of like hanging out, and then they like see this like huge foot imprint, which I personally thought it was, you know, that orc/dog mix. But I wasn't wrong. It is a dog. It just wasn't the dog I thought it was. So they're all kind of like, kind of getting ready to wrap up anyway. But since they see this like imprint, the big sister sees the imprint, and she rounds up all the babies, and they all leave. And then we get to see a glimpse of this beast like fox/chupacabra type of character that will, you know, make himself seen and known soon enough. So we're moving on to a new city, and it's called Lindon, and this is the capital of the High Elves. So we meet this character named Elrond, and he's BFFs with Galadriel. They're BFFs, and they're talking on a cliff, and Galadriel's like showing him like, yo, like, you know, Sauron, he's like here. He was here. He's like still alive. Like, look at this imprint. It was the same imprint on my brother. And Elrond is like, that doesn't prove that he's still alive, girl. Like, it's just a he was here mark. It doesn't say when he was here. He didn't sign it with like Sauron, apostrophe 22. So, or, you know, whenever that time period was. Yeah, so it's really not enough to say Elrond was there, but you know, she's not taking it because she's like, I know he was here. And so they're right by the cliff while they're having this conversation. And honestly, Elrond did deserve a little push off the cliff, in my opinion. You just don't disrespect Galadriel. She's clearly like not coming from nowhere, even though it wasn't substantiated enough, but I would say just throw him off the cliff. Why not? I'm sure he'll survive it, right? Don't like elves live, like, aren't they almost immortal? Well, no, because then her brother died, so that wouldn't, technically they're not immortal. But you know, I can't keep up with who's immortal, who's not immortal. They like to switch up the stories a lot, or you know, their immortality. Anyway, we move back to the little hobbits. And we learned that the sister who discovered the Bigfoot imprint, her name is Eleanor Brandyfoot. Eleanor Brandyfoot. That's her name. And she's talking to her mom, and the mom is basically telling them, like, you know, everybody in this world has a place. You know, the men have their grains, the dwarves have their mines, and the elves have their towers or the forests. The trees also have the forests, and they're Harfoots. And so at this point I thought they were hobbits, but it turns out that they're actually the same. The Harfoots are just a different type of hobbit. They're a much more melanated, sun-kissed hobbit. than the ones that we've typically seen. So, okay, I'm game up. We're not going to call them hobbits anymore. Even though they are hobbits, we're just going to call them by their ethnic name, which is Harfoots, I believe. I don't know. Would that make them ethnically Harfoots? Imagine. Okay. So then we move on to the elves ceremony. And at this point in time, Galadriel, or G, she doesn't want the ceremony. She finds this ceremony a bit dismissing, kind of like the king is like, all right, girl, you did your thing. Cool, you tried to find Mr. Sauron. Obviously, you didn't find him, but here's a ceremony for doing your best. And as he's giving her what maybe a crown of some sort or a sword, she looks at him like she's coming for him next. And again, this woman is filled with rage. I don't understand why you guys don't leave her alone. She will come for you. It's just you don't get in the way of a woman with a vengeance. But they don't like to listen to women, so what do I know? Okay, so we're back with the tree and Finrod. And not that he's alive. G is basically in these it's not a graveyard, but it's just like an honoring of the elves that have passed on, it seems. And so she's in this beautiful fairyland forest with a wooden carving inside a tree of her brother. And she's kind of talking to him, and guess who shows up? Elrond, because he's obsessed with her. And he's, in my opinion, he's kind of talking down to her. He's telling her you should be grateful. The king has been very patient with your insolence and your constant disrespect, and he is just being kind, and you really should be grateful for everything that he's allowed you to do. And G's like, the fuck I care. I don't want a king. I want to go to war. Who's Elrond with, the king or with her? And he's trying to both sides this. He's trying to play neutral, play Switzerland, but you know what that gets you? Nowhere. That also gets you killed. So then we moved to this new place, which I found I didn't think that we could get in more places, more newer introductions, but here we are. We're with a character named Arondir and Arondir. I think that's his name. Arondir. And he's inside a bar. And this man looks like he's an elf soldier of some kind, I think. I'm not really quite sure what he is. But again, it's I felt like so much was happening in this episode. And we were introduced to so much that I couldn't really focus on what was actually going on and how all these people interconnected. But again, it's the first episode of the first season, so we have time, but kind of wish they made it a little bit more clear in this episode. But anyway, so we're with Arondir, and he's at this bar, and he's trying to talk to someone, or the bartender, and I have no idea what they were saying. I could not understand that man. Not Arondir, but the bartender. They were all talking to each other, and I was kind of all right, whatever, moving on. But then Arondir, he comes outside, and he's with another soldier elf, and they're kind of talking about, they haven't seen anything for years, and who are they really chasing? And he's kind of we're not going to stop until the king tells us to stop. So then Arondir goes to this house, and he's meeting up with this woman, and this woman somehow is now needed to help a cow. So she goes to the cow, and she can't really tell what's wrong with the cow. But then Arondir gets really close, and he pulled one of the otters, and now she's spilling blood. Ew. I mean, obviously Sauron is back. He's back, baby. Is that what's happening? So then we move to Linden. We're back with Linden. And the king and Elrond are talking. And at first it kind of seems like they're just kind of having like kind of small talk, kind of dark talk, but not really like conspiring against G just yet. But I got a whiff that they were both like annoyed with her. So then now we're back at the Southlands, and Arondir, he's with this woman, and they're looking over the hillside, and something is burning. I couldn't tell if it was the city that was burning or just the grasslands and the trees, which would still be very significant. And they're kind of like, it's the darkness is starting. So we see the darkness starting in the south, in the Southlands. That's where they are. And while all of this is happening, Galadriel, she's on a boat heading somewhere. I'm assuming she was heading to her like Elvian death of some kind, but she was heading to. They were on a boat with like a bunch of other elves, and they were ready to be received by the light. Remember, this kind of takes us back to the very beginning when her brother was when she had asked her brother, how do we know when we go to the light and versus the darkness? And we finally hear the response where her brother says, well, you don't really know what light is until you've touched the darkness. And she's thinking about these things, and she's struggling with whether or not she wants to go into the light or fight with a vengeance. And it's kind of back and forth. And so while this is happening, we're back with Elden. We're back at Linden with the king and Elrond. And they're kind of looking like, I'm kind of thinking, is this a trap? Because they're kind of giving each other a very ominous look, like, you know, we're going to send them to go see the light, but we're actually going to go kill them so we don't have to deal with them. So I'm really thinking like this must be a trap. Like she knows that this must be a trap. But instead she decides that she's just going to go deeper into the darkness. And she jumps off the boat while all of her other mates are into the light. And then she finds herself lost at sea now in this big vast ocean, and she's watching her homies basically disappear and dissipate into the light. And so at this point there was like a meteor that everyone was seeing, the Harfoots, Arondir and the woman, the king, who else did we see in these times? I think that was it. But there's this like meteor that's kind of flying through the land. Even the trees were like so afraid of seeing this. Like they were embracing each other when the meteor came by. And so kind of like what looked like a yellow maple leaf falls on the ground beside the king at Linden, and he picks it up, and it looks like it's on fire, and he turns it around. And then we see the darkness that the leaf has taken over. Kind of like in Moana, you know, when the darkness takes over the land and now the crops, they can't have crops and all that stuff. If you've seen Moana, you know what I'm talking about. And so finally the meteor lands and it explodes. And it happens to explode right by Mrs. Eleanor Harfoot, or Eleanor Brandyfoot, who is a Harfoot. And she looks closer to the meteor, and it's not just your average meteor. It's not just a rock. It turns out that it was a man. A man in a meteor has landed in Middle Earth, and then that's the episode. So yeah, I mean, we got a lot in this first hour of the Rings of Power. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I'm hoping they can like tighten it up a little bit for me and help me see where the story is going, maybe tighten up the characters. But I'm really excited because we have Galadriel, who's the main character, And she was the actress in Saint Maud, if any of you have seen that seemingly psychological religious thriller. She was incredible in that, so I know that she's going to be really good in this because she's already activated. She's already like summoning Saint Maud. I can already see the fire within her. So yeah, I mean, that's all I have for you guys today. If you guys have any questions, please hit me up on hbxpod@gmail.com. Follow me on social media at hbxpod on Instagram, Hola Bichola on TikTok. And that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you much for tuning in to Queen of the Ring. And I'll see you next time. Bye.